So back in 2007, Dungeons and Dragons was an fourth edition was announced, and in 2008 it came out, and it was hot garbage. And I don't think that's not fair. It was as a game all by itself. If it came out as what it was, if it was announced and sold as what it was, it probably would have done very well. Unfortunately, Dungeons and Dragons is a role-playing game, and what fourth edition amounts to is it's a board game. And to really bring that point home, instead of talking about squares, instead of talking about feet, they started announcing movement in squares. And so while they said out loud, you don't have to buy miniatures and all this and that and boards and all that stuff, it really wasn't set up for theater of the mind anymore. It was entirely set up to market not only the books, and it was also marketed so that you would buy miniatures and boards and maps and everything else. And so on top of that, to add insult to injury, it wasn't backwards compatible with all of the 3.0 and 3.5 material. And so I can understand, I myself was rather irritated at the fact that I had invested hundreds of dollars into supplements, and when they came out with fourth edition, all those supplements became collector's items, and I wasn't able to really use them anymore. And so Paizo really filled a need when they announced and published Pathfinder first edition. And Pathfinder first edition was awesome because it basically took us back to 3.5 and 3.0, and it was backwards compatible with all those supplements. And this document, this book, this game has stood for a decade. And interestingly enough, after 10 years, D&D 5th edition comes out, and 5th edition went back to it was a return to form, and 5th edition fixed all the problems that everyone hated about 4th edition. And honestly, the truth of the matter is that Paizo filled a need, and they got their foot in the door by fulfilling that need. It's like, see a need, fill a need kind of thing. And so they went ahead and had this great product. They were able to amass a huge amount of brand loyalty. And the unfortunate thing, and I really went back and forth about whether or not I even wanted to try and pick up second edition Pathfinder, because honestly, I thought, well, what do we need it for? We have Dungeons and Dragons, and why do I want to play a game that is basically still riding the coattails of Dungeons and Dragons 10 years later? And so, however, I couldn't resist the opportunity to go out there and read and play a little bit of Pathfinder second edition. And I have to say, this book is amazing. Honestly, as far as production value and quality is concerned, this is a heavy, thickly bound book. They also have a leather bound edition. And honestly, I enjoy Pathfinder, but I am not a buy it in leather bound diehard fan of Pathfinder. But I went through the book, and honestly, the production quality, the artwork has always been one of Paizo's real strengths. Is that from their magazine publishing days, they've been able to access a deep breadth and width of talent in order to bring their product to life. And so, looking through it though, I really wondered what Paizo was going to do with Pathfinder in order to make it relevant, to make it continue to be relevant today, as opposed to, what brought it relevance is no longer really an issue anymore. D&D 5th edition is a ton of fun to play. The system is fairly simple to pick up and learn, and characters are fairly simple to pick up and learn. And so as I went through here, I did notice a couple of things that were very particular, kind of, I think, responses, once again, to the way that Dungeons and Dragons did things. So in 5th edition, they added things like backgrounds. And so, here we have backgrounds again in Pathfinder. Now, one of the things that I think is genius, though, and I say that, I take that with a grain of salt, because I've been doing this before this book came out, but I noticed that with D&D 5th edition, the book lets you pick backgrounds last, is what they recommend. Is the backgrounds are optional and you pick those last. But backgrounds and races provide benefits like tangible, like additions to your character sheet. And so it always made the most sense to me to pick race and background first, and then class and dice and all that stuff. And so sure enough, I'm not apparently not the only person who saw that, because as Paizo has apparently picked up on, step 2 is ability score, step 3 is race, which they call ancestry now, and step 4 is pick a background. So this is pretty much exactly the order that I've been doing it in since 5th edition came out. And so to be honest, as I look through this and I look through this book, they are building on the world that they created with Pathfinder 10 years ago. But then now I see that the new goal here with Pathfinder is to out D&D D&D. Because honestly, it's very similar in many ways to Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. And so it's one of those things where I think they're crowdsourcing their what are the popular features of, you know, one of the most relevant and, you know, games with the greatest longevity in the history of tabletop role playing, with perhaps the exception of maybe Rifts, if they're still relevant. I don't know, because I haven't seen a single post about Rifts in a very long time, but they're just as old as D&D. Kevin, if you're out there, I love you, buddy. You have a great system. Time to update, bro. Update though. Okay. So that said, it's great, you know, for $60 you're getting a lot of book, you know. As compare this to your player's handbook that you get with Dungeons and Dragons, and you are certainly getting your money's worth. Even though they charge more, you get more. And this includes a whole bunch of stuff that you wouldn't get with a D&D 5th edition book. There are, of course, tons of items and feats, and the way that they break down ancestry or races and ancestry now is actually pretty interesting as well, because they've kind of turned your race building into its own step. Instead of kind of just handing you a race and going, yeah, this is what you do now, they actually give each race a ton of attention, a ton of time. You pick ancestry, and then, you know, you could be an elf, but, you know, what kind of elf? Wood elf, or ice elf, or whisper elf, and they have a whole bunch of different variations on that I think bring a ton of flavor to your character. I always thought that race had at some point had devolved into +2 dexterity, -2 constitution, and that's about all you got out of it. And then you basically, you know, you're either a short jerk, a tall jerk, or a dark skinned jerk, or a big dumb jerk, because honestly all of the races seem to have some sort of hang up. So having so much more flavor added to the characters, I think was a great addition. Goblins made it back in here as a player race, which I think is pretty sweet. Goblins, I don't think, get enough attention. They have the Alchemist in here as a starting character class. They've got 12 classes that you get to choose from. Bard makes its return. Barbarian, of course, and their iconic characters all make returns here as well. So overall, this is a solid quality product. I'm very glad to see that Paizo is not just recycling their old stuff. They did make changes. You don't roll dice. You don't have standard array for ability scores anymore. I think that was probably one of the sweetest changes, I thought. Overall, the net result is the same. You'll have some scores higher than others. Your class will, you know, what your choices, the choices that you make as far as race and class and background will affect your ability modifiers. And in a sense, I think that helps provide, especially new players, provides new players with a better guide as to where their stats should lie. Because before, it's like, yeah, you roll six numbers and you assign those numbers as you see fit. And so you could end up with a fighter with a strength of 8, a dexterity of 2, and a charisma of 17. And while that might make for a fairly interesting character who is clearly trying to overcome their obstacles and shortcomings, it does not make for a very effective character. And at the end of the day, I think that one of the reasons that we all play Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder or any kind of role-playing game really is it's fantasy fulfillment. It's to go out there and explore. And in many cases, you either want to play a villain or a hero, but in either case, you want to be good at what you do. You don't want to simply play a character who just fumbles through life and just gets absolutely destroyed by the world. We want to go out there and we want to be the best at whatever we are in the game. And so I think that does offer us a great deal of options or at least a lot more guidance for new players as to, well, this is what's going to help you be successful at this game, at being a fighter, make you a better rogue or make you a better cleric. And I think that guidance is very necessary for new, and even some like middle level players still seem to struggle with the concept of, my character should be good at what he does. Well, I want to play a monk who's awesome at healing, but you don't have any healing abilities. Oh, well, that's stupid. No, I mean, it's a game. There's rules. There's a system in place. And I think that we all want to play the game within the system and enjoy the system. So I think kudos to Paizo for sitting there and really putting together a thoughtful update to their game and making sure that players actually get their money's worth out of the $60 that they're going to ask you to spend on this rather hefty tome. And I was going to be very disappointed if it was a bunch of recycled crap. If it was all just like 10 years worth of stuff that's got a new level of varnish on it, I was going to say, well, that's a shame, But all said and done, Pathfinder 2nd edition, a worthy addition to any role player's library of books. I think that I'm going to get some good use out of this. In fact, my son, as we were walking out of the bookstore, he looks up to me and says, "Dad, my sister is running Dungeons and Dragons, so do you want to run Pathfinder?" And I got a tear in my eye, like, "Yes, son, I'd love to play some Pathfinder with you. Absolutely." So I can give you guys another update later on if you want. By the way, if you want to hear some more about my opinions on Pathfinder or any other role-playing game, feel free to write down in the comments. And if this video was interesting and you got this far, by all means, please hit like, share, follow, subscribe, all that good stuff. I do broadcast on Twitch on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Friday evenings. Friday evenings are specifically dedicated to Dungeons and Dragons. So if you wish to have a look at how I run Dungeons and Dragons, then by all means, please come on by, give us a show, watch the show, and let us know how we're doing. Until then, thank you very much for watching. Have yourselves a great day. See you around the table next time.